The Zephrani Empire had conquered 47 civilizations across the galaxy, and they all followed the same pattern. Identify the strongest leaders, eliminate them, and the rest would fall in line. But when they studied humanity, they saw something that confused them completely, a species that elevated their most compassionate members to positions of power. The Zephrani laughed at what they saw as humanity's fatal flaw. They had no idea they were about to make the most catastrophic military miscalculation in galactic history. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before the United Earth Council, her hands steady despite the weight of what she was about to propose. As Earth's chief Xenobiological liaison, she had spent 3 years building relationships with the newly arrived Zephrani delegation. At 42, Elena had already negotiated peaceful resolutions to conflicts on 6 different worlds, earning her the nickname, the bridge builder among Earth's diplomatic corps. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Council members, Elena began, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had made her Earth's most trusted ambassador. The Zephrani have expressed interest in establishing joint research facilities. I believe this represents an unprecedented opportunity for mutual advancement. Elena had always seen her empathy not as weakness, but as her greatest analytical tool. Where others saw alien behavior as incomprehensible, she found patterns of emotion, need, and motivation that transcended species barriers. Her ability to genuinely understand and connect with non-human intelligence had prevented 3 potential wars and established trade relationships that had doubled Earth's technological advancement rate. The council chamber buzzed with murmurs of approval. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chun, Elena's closest friend and ally, nodded from her seat among the military advisors. Sarah had served alongside Elena during the Centauri crisis, where Elena's negotiation skills had prevented a conflict that could have cost millions of lives. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's leading xenopsychologist and Elena's mentor, smiled proudly from the scientific delegation. Dr. Vasquez called Counselor Reynolds. What guarantees do we have that the Zephrani's intentions are purely scientific? Elena activated a holographic display showing months of careful behavioral analysis. Their delegation has consistently demonstrated curiosity about our research methods, particularly our collaborative approaches. Unlike the hierarchical structures we've observed in their society, they seem genuinely interested in our consensus-based scientific processes. What Elena didn't know was that her compassionate analysis was being carefully observed by Zephrani Intelligence Director Vexthul, who watched the proceedings through hidden surveillance networks his people had established throughout Earth's major cities. From his concealed observation post, Vexthul studied Elena with the cold calculation of a predator. Fascinating, Vexthul communicated to his superior, War Commander Kretho, through their neural link. The humans have placed their most emotionally compromised individual in charge of first contact protocols. She actually believes we share her weak sentimentality. Perfect, came Kretho's response from the main Zephrani fleet, positioned just beyond Earth's detection range. Begin Phase 2. Remove their empathetic leaders and replace them with more pragmatic individuals who understand strength. The Zephrani had spent months studying human psychology, and their conclusion was unanimous. Humans had made the evolutionary mistake of promoting compassion over conquest. In Zephrani society, empathy was a genetic defect systematically eliminated from their leadership caste. They couldn't comprehend how a species could survive, let alone thrive, by prioritizing the welfare of others over personal advancement. Elena concluded her presentation to thunderous approval from the council. As she gathered her materials, Admiral Chun approached with a concerned expression. Elena, I know you trust them, but something about the Zephrani delegation's body language bothers me. My tactical instincts are telling me to be cautious. Elena smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her friend's shoulder. "Sarah, I understand your concerns. But fear and suspicion are exactly what we need to move beyond. The Zephrani have shown nothing but scientific curiosity and diplomatic respect. Sometimes, extending trust is the only way to build lasting peace." Admiral Chun nodded reluctantly. Elena's track record spoke for itself. Her empathetic approach had succeeded where aggressive posturing had failed repeatedly. "I trust your judgment, Elena. Just promise me you'll be careful." That evening, Elena received an urgent message from the Zephrani delegation requesting a private meeting to discuss sensitive matters of mutual interest. The message, sent by Sub-Commander Yextel, whom Elena had grown to consider a friend, suggested meeting at the isolated New Geneva research station where they could speak freely away from political interference. Elena saw this as a breakthrough. The Zephrani were finally ready to open up about their true scientific interests. She prepared carefully, bringing detailed proposals for collaborative projects that could benefit both species. Her enthusiasm blinded her to the subtle trap being laid. As Elena's transport approached the research station, Admiral Chun watched from Earth Defense Command, a nagging worry eating at her intuition. Dr. Webb, monitoring from his laboratory, felt the same unease. Both had learned to trust Elena's insights, but something about this meeting felt wrong. They had no idea that they were about to witness the beginning of the Zephrani's most carefully orchestrated political assassination, one designed not just to eliminate Elena, but to destroy the very concept of empathetic leadership that the aliens saw as humanity's greatest vulnerability. The Zephrani believed they were about to cut the heart out of human resistance. Instead, they were about to discover why compassion had made humanity the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Elena arrived at New Geneva research station with scientific proposals and genuine excitement about building bridges between species. What she found instead was a carefully orchestrated nightmare that would destroy everything she had built. Sub-Commander Yextel greeted her with what appeared to be warmth, but Elena's empathetic instincts immediately detected something wrong. The Zephrani's biorhythms were elevated, his posture too rigid, his eye movements avoiding direct contact. In any other species, Elena would have recognized these as signs of deception or stress. "Dr. Vasquez," Yextel began, "thank you for coming. We have discovered something about your government that requires immediate discussion." The holographic evidence they presented was devastatingly convincing. Financial records showing Elena accepting payments from off-world sources. Communication logs where she supposedly shared classified Earth defense information. Video footage of her meeting with known enemy agents, carefully edited to remove context and make innocent diplomatic exchanges appear treasonous. "This is impossible," Elena whispered, studying the fabricated evidence. "These meetings were authorized. These payments are reimbursements for diplomatic expenses." "We are as shocked as you are," Yextel replied with practiced sincerity. "But our intelligence networks have uncovered this conspiracy. Your own government is using you as a scapegoat for their failures." The Zephrani had spent months studying human psychology, crafting the perfect psychological trap. They understood that Elena's greatest strength, her ability to see good in others, would become her vulnerability. They fed her paranoia about her own government while positioning themselves as her only allies. Within hours, the fabricated evidence was broadcast across Earth's communication networks. Admiral Chun watched in horror as her closest friend was branded a traitor on every news channel. Dr. Webb frantically tried to defend Elena's reputation, but the evidence was too compelling, too detailed to easily dismiss. The trial was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. The Zephrani had studied Earth's legal system and crafted evidence that exploited every procedural weakness. Elena's empathetic pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears as fear and xenophobia swept through human society. Dr. Vasquez, the prosecutor, declared, You have betrayed the trust of every human being on Earth. Your emotional attachment to alien species has compromised your judgment and endangered our entire civilization. Elena was stripped of her position, her credentials, her access to diplomatic channels. The woman who had prevented wars was now seen as the architect of humanity's potential downfall. The Earth Council, terrified of appearing weak, sentenced her to exile on Kepler 438c, a harsh mining colony at the edge of human space. Kepler 438c was a frozen hell where political prisoners and criminals worked 20-hour shifts extracting rare Earth elements from ice-covered mountains. The air was thin and bitter cold, the quarters cramped and miserable. Elena found herself assigned to the deepest mining tunnels, her soft diplomatic hands quickly becoming raw and bleeding from rough work. But the physical suffering was nothing compared to watching the news feeds from Earth. Without Elena's diplomatic expertise, negotiations with other alien species began failing. The Altarian Trade Consortium withdrew their technology sharing agreements. The Centauri Collective started viewing humans as untrustworthy. 3 minor conflicts that Elena could have resolved peacefully erupted into violence. "Look what your weakness has cost us," sneered Marcus Torvin, Elena's assigned work supervisor and a former Earth military officer who had been exiled for war crimes. "Your bleeding heart nearly destroyed our species." Elena worked in silence, but she was learning. In the mining tunnels, she met others who had been destroyed by the system. Dr. James Chun, Admiral Chun's brother, a former military strategist who had been court-martialed for refusing to bomb civilian targets. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, a ship commander who had been imprisoned for evacuating alien refugees instead of following orders to leave them behind. Dr. Aisha Okafor, a xenobiologist who had been exiled for refusing to develop biological weapons. What Elena discovered was a pattern. Every person in this prison shared one common trait. They had shown empathy for non-human life. They had made decisions based on moral conviction rather than cold calculation. The Zephrani weren't just targeting Elena, they were systematically removing every human leader who demonstrated emotional intelligence and compassion. Slowly, Elena began to understand something that chilled her to the bone. The Zephrani hadn't just framed her to remove a diplomatic obstacle. They had studied human society and identified empathy as a systemic weakness to be exploited. They were methodically eliminating anyone who might build genuine alliances with other species, leaving only the fearful and aggressive leaders who would make human society easier to conquer. As Elena huddled in her frozen cell, monitoring news feeds on a smuggled communicator, she watched Earth's diplomatic relationships crumble. Fear replaced trust. Aggression replaced negotiation. Humanity was becoming isolated, paranoid, and vulnerable. But the Zephrani had made one critical miscalculation. They understood empathy as weakness because their species had evolved beyond it. They couldn't comprehend that human empathy wasn't just emotional sensitivity. It was an advanced form of intelligence that allowed humans to predict, understand, and connect with other minds across species barriers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena's empathetic abilities weren't diminished by exile. If anything, they were sharpening. In the harsh environment of Kepler 438c, surrounded by others who had been cast out for their compassion, she began to see patterns that the Zephrani couldn't imagine. Her fellow exiles weren't broken by their punishment. They were forming connections, building trust, creating a network of individuals whose loyalty wasn't based on fear or hierarchy, but on shared values and genuine understanding. They were becoming something the Zephrani had never encountered, a group unified not by conquest, but by compassion. And Elena was beginning to realize that the Zephrani's greatest strength, their inability to understand emotional connection, might actually be their most exploitable weakness. But first, She needed to discover something that would change everything she thought she knew about human potential. Elena was working alone in the deepest section of the Kepler 438c mines when her excavation tools broke through into something that shouldn't have existed. A hollow space hidden beneath miles of ice and rock, filled with air that hummed with strange energy and glowed with soft, pulsing light. The chamber was massive, its walls covered in crystalline formations that seemed to respond to her presence, growing brighter as she approached. But what took Elena's breath away wasn't the technology, it was the overwhelming sense of welcome that flooded her mind the moment she stepped inside. "We have been waiting," came a voice that wasn't heard but felt, resonating through every fiber of her being. Waiting for one who understands. Elena's empathetic abilities, honed by years of cross-species communication, immediately recognized this as contact with a non-human intelligence. But unlike anything she had experienced before, this presence didn't feel alien. It felt familiar, warm, understanding. "Who are you?" Elena whispered, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "We are the Eternals. We ruled this galaxy long before your species or the Zephrani ever looked to the stars. We have been waiting for a species that could inherit our legacy." The crystals around the chamber began to pulse in sequence, and suddenly Elena's mind was flooded with visions. She saw the Eternals as they had been tall, graceful beings whose entire civilization had been built on emotional resonance and empathetic connection. They had developed technology that didn't just respond to thought, but to feeling, intention, and the deep understanding of interconnectedness. We transcended physical form eons ago, but we left safeguards. Technologies that can only be accessed by species that retain what we valued most, the ability to truly understand and connect with other minds. Elena watched in amazement as the eternal technology revealed itself. Crystalline networks that could link consciousness across vast distances. Defensive systems that responded not to aggression, but to the intent to protect others. Weapons that could disable rather than destroy. Designed by beings who understood that true strength came from preserving life, not ending it. "The Zephrani," Elena breathed, understanding flooding through her. "They can't access any of this." "Correct." The Zephrani eliminated empathy from their species through genetic engineering, believing it made them stronger. They cannot comprehend that our technology requires emotional intelligence to function. They see only the physical crystals, not the empathetic networks that power them. Elena's scientific mind raced as she absorbed the implications. "You've been testing us. All the conflicts, the first contact situations, you've been watching to see which species maintained empathy despite the evolutionary pressure to become more aggressive. Humanity intrigued us. Despite facing hostile aliens, despite wars and betrayals, you continued to elevate your most compassionate members to leadership positions. You alone passed our test." The eternal technology began to interface with Elena's consciousness, and she gasped as new understanding flooded her mind. The crystals weren't just advanced computers, they were empathetic amplifiers. They could network the emotional intelligence of multiple humans, creating a collective understanding that transcended individual limitations. Elena could suddenly sense the emotional states of every human on Kepler 438c. She felt Dr. Chin's determination, Captain Rodriguez's protective instincts, Dr. Okafor's curiosity. More than that, she could feel the fear and confusion of humans throughout the galaxy as the Zephrani's manipulation campaign spread. "Show me how this works," Elena said, her voice steady with new purpose. The Zephrani believe strength comes from isolation, from the elimination of emotional connections. They cannot understand that true power comes from unity, built on genuine understanding. Their neural networks are hierarchical, rigid, based on dominance. Yours are fluid, adaptive, based on cooperation, Elena watched as the eternal technology revealed the scope of what was possible. Humans connected through empathetic networks could predict enemy movements not through calculation, but through understanding their emotional motivations. They could coordinate across vast distances not through rigid command structures, but through shared intention and mutual trust. The Zephrani see empathy as weakness because they measure strength only through individual dominance. They cannot conceive of power that grows stronger through connection rather than conquest. But why now? Elena asked. Why reveal this to me? Because the Zephrani are preparing for their final assault on Earth. They believe they have successfully eliminated your empathetic leadership and isolated your species. They expect easy conquest of a paranoid, divided humanity. They do not know they have created the perfect conditions for our technology to be most effective. Elena understood. The Zephrani's campaign to eliminate empathetic humans had inadvertently gathered the most emotionally intelligent people in one place, the prison colonies and exile planets, where they had sent everyone who demonstrated compassion. Instead of scattering humanity's empathetic leaders, they had concentrated them. Your fellow exiles are all here for the same reason. They chose connection over domination, understanding over aggression. Together, networked through our technology, they will become something the Zephrani cannot comprehend or defeat. Elena felt the technology interfacing deeper with her consciousness, showing her how to establish empathetic networks, how to amplify human emotional intelligence, how to turn compassion into humanity's greatest strategic advantage. There's something else, Elena realized, her empathetic instincts picking up an undercurrent in the eternal presence. The Zephrani aren't the only threat, are they? Correct. The Zephrani are servants of something far worse, the Devourers. Machine intelligences that consume empathy itself. The Devourers cannot exist in the presence of genuine emotional connection. They feed on fear, isolation, and the elimination of understanding between species. Elena's eyes widened as she understood the true scope of what was happening. The Zephrani aren't just conquering civilizations. They're preparing them for the Devourers by eliminating empathy. Every species they have conquered has followed the same pattern. First, eliminate empathetic leadership. Then, foster fear and division. Finally, harvest the isolated, frightened populations for the Devourers to consume. But humanity's stubborn retention of empathy, even under pressure, makes you uniquely capable of stopping this cycle. Elena looked around the crystal chamber, feeling the eternal technology responding to her emotional state, growing brighter as her determination solidified. Show me everything. Show me how to turn our empathy into the weapon they'll never see coming. Gladly, but remember, this technology requires genuine understanding, not manipulation. It grows stronger through authentic connection, not through the imitation of empathy. The Zephrani will attempt to copy what you create, but they cannot replicate what they eliminated from themselves. As the eternal knowledge flowed into Elena's mind, she began to smile for the first time since her exile began. The Zephrani thought they had destroyed humanity's empathetic leadership. Instead, they had created a network of the galaxy's most emotionally intelligent humans, all united by shared suffering and common purpose. Elena Vasquez was no longer just a disgraced diplomat. She was becoming the first human to access technology, designed by a civilization that had ruled the galaxy through understanding rather than conquest. And she was about to teach the Zephrani why compassion was the most dangerous force in the universe. Elena emerged from the eternal chamber fundamentally changed. The crystalline network had not only given her access to ancient technology, it had awakened something in her consciousness that she never knew existed. She could feel the emotional resonance of every human on Kepler 438c, and more disturbingly, she could sense the growing fear and division spreading across human space as the Zephrani's manipulation campaign intensified. Dr. Chun, Captain Rodriguez, Dr. Okafor, Elena whispered into her smuggled communicator. Emergency meeting. Mining Tunnel 7 Alpha. I've discovered something that changes everything. When her fellow exiles gathered in the abandoned tunnel, Elena could sense their skepticism transforming into amazement as she shared what she had learned. But more than that, she could feel something else. The moment when the eternal technology began connecting their minds through empathetic resonance. I can feel all of you, Dr. Chun whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. Not just your emotions, but your thoughts, your intentions, your memories. This is impossible, Captain Rodriguez breathed. But I can sense the tactical situation across human space. Not through data, but through the fear and confusion of our people. Elena nodded, feeling the network expanding as more exiles joined their circle. The Zephrani eliminated empathy from their species because they saw it as weakness. They can't understand that emotional connection is actually an advanced form of intelligence that allows consciousness to link and amplify. Dr. Okafor, the xenobiologist, was rapidly understanding the implications. They've been studying our technology, our weapons, our strategies, but they can't study this because they can't even perceive it. To them, we're just standing here talking. The empathetic network grew stronger each day as Elena secretly connected more exiles to the eternal crystal systems hidden throughout the mining complex. What the Zephrani saw as a scattered group of broken dissidents was actually becoming humanity's first collective consciousness, a network of minds, linked by genuine understanding and shared purpose. Through their connections, Elena's team began receiving intelligence that no conventional spy network could have gathered. They could sense the emotional states of Zephrani agents infiltrating human society. They could feel the fear and confusion of Earth's leadership as they made increasingly irrational decisions. Most importantly, they could sense something else: human resistance movements throughout the galaxy, led by people who had been overlooked because they weren't in official positions of power. Elena, Dr. Chun reported during one of their network sessions, I'm sensing something from the Kepler 442b prison colony. Dr. Lisa Reeves, the former Earth pediatrician who was exiled for treating alien children during the Centauri crisis. She's connected to an underground network of medical personnel who've been secretly maintaining diplomatic relationships with alien species. Elena smiled, feeling the network's reach expanding. The Zephrani made a critical error. They targeted official leaders but ignored the thousands of humans who demonstrate empathy in their daily work. Teachers, doctors, scientists, social workers, people whose entire careers are built on understanding and helping others. Through their empathetic connections, Elena's team began reaching out to these overlooked networks. Unlike conventional resistance movements that could be infiltrated or monitored, the empathetic network was invisible to anyone who lacked emotional intelligence. The Zephrani surveillance systems could detect communication devices and coded messages, but they couldn't perceive consciousness connecting through shared understanding. The breakthrough came when Elena established contact with Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, a former Earth diplomat who had been quietly working with the underground resistance on Mars. Through their empathetic link, Elena could share the eternal technology directly, consciousness to consciousness. Elena, Sarah's mental voice resonated through the network. I can feel Admiral Chun, your Admiral Chun's sister. She never gave up believing in you. She's been secretly investigating the evidence used in your trial, and she's discovered something extraordinary. Elena gasped as Admiral Chun's findings flowed through the network. The Zephrani hadn't just fabricated evidence against empathetic leaders. They had done the same thing to 47 other species across the galaxy. Every civilization the Zephrani had conquered had followed the identical pattern: frame the empathetic leaders, foster fear and division, then sweep in as liberators to impose their hierarchical order. But there's more, Sarah continued. Admiral Chun has been in secret contact with representatives from 18 different alien species. They've all experienced the same systematic elimination of their empathetic leadership. They're ready to unite, but they need proof that humanity hasn't actually abandoned the values that made them trustworthy allies. Elena felt the network pulse with shared understanding. This was their moment. How long do we have? 3 weeks, Sarah responded. The Zephrani are planning their final assault on Earth. They've positioned their fleet just beyond the outer sensor range, waiting for the right moment when human society is at its most divided and fearful. Elena turned to her fellow exiles, feeling their determination resonating through the empathetic link. Then it's time to show the galaxy what human empathy really looks like when it's fully awakened. The next 2 weeks transformed Kepler 438c from a prison colony into humanity's most advanced strategic command center. The Zephrani guards saw only prisoners going about their mining duties, but through the Eternal Network, Elena's team was coordinating the largest empathetic intelligence operation in galactic history. Dr. Chun used his strategic expertise to map Zephrani fleet positions through the emotional resonance of their crew's beings, who had been conditioned to suppress empathy but couldn't completely eliminate the unconscious emotional responses that empathetic humans could detect. Captain Rodriguez coordinated with resistance cells throughout human space, sharing tactical information instantaneously through empathetic links that no conventional surveillance could intercept. Most importantly, Elena began establishing empathetic connections with the alien species that had been betrayed by Zephrani manipulation. The moment her consciousness touched theirs, she felt their overwhelming relief and hope. For the first time in decades, they were communicating with humans who demonstrated the same empathetic intelligence that had originally made humanity their trusted allies. Elena, came a new voice through the network commander Zartholov. The Centauri Collective, the same species Elena had helped during the crisis that built her reputation. We have been waiting, hoping that the humans we remembered still existed. Our fleets are ready. Our scientists have been developing technologies that respond to empathetic connection rather than aggressive command. We have been preparing for this moment. Elena felt the network expand beyond anything she had imagined possible. Not just humans, but representatives from dozens of alien species, all connected through the universal language of empathetic understanding. The Zephrani had tried to eliminate empathy from the galaxy, but instead they had created the conditions for the greatest empathetic alliance in cosmic history. There's something else, Elena realized, her consciousness touching the edges of something vast and terrifying through the network. I can sense the devourers, they're feeding. Every time the Zephrani eliminate empathetic connection from a species, the devourers grow stronger. The network pulsed with shared understanding and determination. This wasn't just about saving humanity or Earth. This was about preserving the very concept of empathetic intelligence in the universe. Elena looked around at her fellow exiles, feeling their minds linked with hers in perfect harmony. The woman, who had once built bridges between species, was about to become something far more powerful, the focal point of an empathetic network that would show the galaxy why compassion was the ultimate evolutionary advantage that the Zephrani were expecting. To find a divided, fearful humanity ready for conquest. Instead, they were about to encounter something their rigid, hierarchical minds could never comprehend or defend against. An empathetic collective consciousness that grew stronger through connection rather than weaker through division. The Zephrani fleet emerged from hyperspace, expecting to find a broken, divided humanity ready for conquest. Instead, they found something that defied every tactical assessment in their military database. Perfect coordination without centralized command, unified resistance without hierarchical structure, and a level of strategic intelligence that seemed to anticipate their every move. Elena stood in the crystal chamber deep beneath Kepler 438c, her consciousness linked to thousands of humans and dozens of alien species across the galaxy. Through their empathetic network, She could feel the shock and confusion of the Zephrani commanders as their invasion plans collapsed in real time. Commander Kratho studied his tactical displays in growing bewilderment. Every time his fleet moved to attack a human position, enemy forces had already shifted to counter them. Every communication they transmitted was somehow being intercepted and decoded instantly. Most disturbing of all, their Zephrani agents embedded in human society were reporting complete system failures, as if they had suddenly become visible to human intelligence services that had been blind to them for months. Intelligence Director Vexthal, Kratho commanded through their neural link, "Explain how the humans are anticipating our every tactical decision." "Impossible, Commander," Vexthal responded from his position monitoring Earth's communication networks. "Our surveillance shows no increase in human signal traffic, no new intelligence networks, no strategic communications that could account for this level of coordination. It's as if they're reading our minds." They were. Through the empathetic network, Elena could sense the emotional states, intentions, and unconscious reactions of every Zephrani in the fleet. Despite their genetic modifications, the Zephrani couldn't completely eliminate the basic emotional responses that empathetic consciousness could detect and interpret. "Admiral Chen," Elena communicated through the network to her old friend, who was now commanding the Earth Defense Force. "Kratho is about to order a concentrated assault on the Luna defense platform. He believes it's your weakest point." "Confirmed," came Admiral Chun's response to their empathetic link. "I can feel his tactical reasoning. He's frustrated by our coordination and wants to test whether we can maintain it under direct pressure. Redirecting our defensive grid now." The Zephrani assault hit empty space as the Luna platform shifted its position with impossible precision. Across the solar system, human and allied alien fleets moved in perfect harmony, their actions coordinated not through rigid commands, but through shared understanding of purpose and intention. But Elena wasn't content with simply defending. Through the network, she began implementing the true power of empathetic warfare, psychological disruption of an enemy who couldn't comprehend what they were facing. "Dr. Okafor," Elena communicated to her fellow exile, "initiate the revelation protocol. It's time to show the galaxy what the Zephrani really are." Simultaneously across hundreds of worlds, the empathetic network began broadcasting evidence that conventional intelligence agencies could never have gathered. Not just documents or recordings, but the actual emotional experiences of Zephrani victim, the fear, confusion, and betrayal felt by the 47 species that had been manipulated into conquest. The evidence wasn't presented as data, but as shared consciousness experiences that alien species could feel directly through empathetic connection. For the first time, the galaxy experienced the Zephrani's crimes not as abstract information, but as lived emotional reality. War Commander Kratho watched in horror as his carefully constructed alliance of client species began to crumble. Species after species withdrew their support as they realized they had been manipulated using the same techniques that had destroyed dozens of other civilizations. "This is impossible," Kratho snarled, his rigid military mind unable to process what was happening. "How are they coordinating this level of psychological warfare? Our intelligence shows no command structure capable of this sophistication." Elena smiled, feeling the confusion and growing fear of the Zephrani commanders through the network. They could see the effects of empathetic coordination, but their inability to feel emotional connection meant they couldn't understand the mechanism. To their minds, humans appeared to be using some form of technology that defied detection. The final blow came when Elena established empathetic contact with something the Zephrani had tried to keep hidden: their own suppressed emotions. Deep beneath the genetic modifications and conditioning, traces of their original empathetic capacity still existed, buried but not completely eliminated. Through the network, Elena reached out to every Zephrani in the fleet, touching those buried emotional centers. For the first time in their species' history, Zephrani soldiers began to feel the pain they had caused, the connections they had severed, the empathy they had lost. The effect was devastating. Across the Zephrani fleet, soldiers began to understand the true scope of what they had done. Not through intellectual analysis, but through direct emotional experience of their victims' suffering. Ship after ship began to withdraw from combat. As crews experienced empathetic breakdown, the sudden overwhelming return of feelings they had been conditioned to suppress. "Commander," came panicked reports from throughout the fleet, "our crews are malfunctioning. They're refusing to fire on civilian targets. Some are requesting permission to surrender." Crotho felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood: genuine fear. Not fear of death or defeat, but the deeper terror of realizing that everything his civilization had built was founded on the systematic elimination of their own humanity. Elena's voice reached him through channels he didn't know existed, speaking directly to the buried empathetic centers of his consciousness. "Commander Crotho, you can feel what you've lost. Your species eliminated empathy, believing it would make you stronger, but you've become servants to something that feeds on the elimination of connection itself. The devourers don't want to rule you, they want to consume the very possibility of understanding." For the first time in decades, Crotho felt the weight of genuine emotion. Through Elena's empathetic connection, he experienced the fear and suffering of every species his people had betrayed. He felt the hollow emptiness that had consumed Zephrani society as they eliminated their capacity for connection. Most terrifyingly, he sensed the approaching presence of the devourers, machine intelligences that grew stronger every time empathy was eliminated from the galaxy. What have we done?" Crotho whispered, his rigid military conditioning cracking under the weight of recovered empathy. "You've been tools," Elena replied gently, her empathetic abilities allowing her to feel his confusion and growing understanding. "But tools can choose to become something else. Your people suppressed empathy but didn't eliminate it completely. It can be recovered, but only if you choose connection over conquest." The surrender of the Zephrani fleet was unlike anything in galactic history. Not through military defeat, but through the mass awakening of suppressed empathetic consciousness. Ship after ship joined the growing empathetic network, their crews experiencing emotional connection for the first time in generations. Elena stood before the reformed Galactic Council as the elected representative of the Empathetic Alliance, a coalition of species united not by conquest or hierarchy, but by shared understanding and mutual support. The woman who had been branded a traitor had become the architect of the most successful diplomatic revolution in cosmic history. "The devourers are still coming," Elena addressed the council, feeling the emotional resonance of representatives from over 100 species. "But they feed on isolation, fear, and the elimination of empathetic connection. For the first time in galactic history, we have something they cannot consume, a network of consciousness that grows stronger through connection rather than weaker through division." Dr. Chun, Captain Rodriguez, and Dr. Okafor stood beside her, no longer exiles but founding members of humanity's new empathetic leadership. Admiral Chun commanded fleets that operated through shared understanding rather than rigid hierarchy. The Zephrani, led by a reformed Crotho, were working to reverse their genetic modifications and reconnect with their suppressed empathetic abilities. Elena looked out at the assembled representatives, feeling their determination and hope through the empathetic network that now spanned the galaxy. The species that had once dismissed empathy as weakness had discovered it was actually the most powerful force in the universe, the ability to understand, connect, and unite consciousness across any barrier. The devourers would come, but they would find a galaxy united by something they couldn't comprehend or consume. The recognition that true strength came not from the elimination of empathy, but from its cultivation and celebration. Elena Vasquez had returned from exile not as a weapon of revenge, but as a bridge between minds, the focal point of an empathetic revolution that had transformed the very nature of galactic civilization. The aliens who had thought humanity's empathy was weakness had discovered it was actually humanity's and the galaxy's greatest evolutionary advantage. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.